A senior Russian lawmaker has cautioned that any U.S. military strike on Iran, whether through missile attacks or invasion, could lead to a much wider conflict. Vladimir Jabarov, first deputy chair of Russia's Federation Council Foreign Affairs Committee, issued the warning while speaking in Moscow. Jabarov warned that retaliation would not remain confined to Iran, according to Russian state media reporting. He said neighboring countries could be dragged into conflict, global oil flows could be disrupted if Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, and step-by-step escalation could raise the risk of a much wider conflict, including worst-case scenarios. Our government officials and political experts are dedicating a considerable amount of their attention to the situation concerning Iran, Jabarov said, according to Russian state media. And one can only sincerely hope that the United States will not resort to such drastic actions as a full-scale invasion of Iran or the launching of any kind of extensive bombing and missile strikes. He warned a U.S. strike could spiral into a broader war, according to Russian state media reporting. The warning comes as U.S. military deployments increase in the region, and Iran signals it would respond forcefully to any attack. He argued Iran's size and military capacity would make any conflict far more costly, according to his remarks. Jabarov characterized Iran as a large nation with significant military resources, though specific capability claims should be understood as his framing rather than independently verified assessments. If there are repercussions, then many surrounding countries could also suffer, Jabarov said, according to Russian state media. The warning emphasizes potential regional spillover from any conflict. The reference to Iranian military capability reflects assessments that include ballistic missiles, drone programs, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' various assets. However, the extent and effectiveness of these capabilities are assessed differently by different sources. Jabarov's framing positions any potential U.S. action against Iran as fundamentally different from previous military operations due to Iran's population and geography. This perspective aligns with broader Russian messaging opposing U.S. military action in the region. He claimed some regional governments want to avoid being dragged into a war, but their exact positions vary and are not fully confirmed publicly. Jabarov attributed opposition to military action to multiple regional actors, though this characterization represents his assessment. Saudi officials have said they will not allow their airspace to be used for strikes, and the UAE has reiterated its territory will not be used for hostile action, reports say. These stances reflect concern about retaliation, but do not necessarily represent categorical opposition to all U.S. action. Israeli officials have not publicly confirmed positions that Jabarov attributes to them regarding opposition to military action against Iran. Israel's actual stance on potential U.S. military action is not clearly established in recent public statements. The claim that regional countries oppose military action may reflect their concerns about retaliation rather than opposition to action against Iran per se. Regional calculations involve complex factors including relationships with both Washington and Tehran. Jabarov warned about the potential economic consequences if Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz in response to any attack. Moreover, Iran, if necessary, has already threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz, he said, according to Russian state media. Blocking the Strait of Hormuz could severely disrupt global oil flows, since roughly about a fifth of the world's traded oil passes through it, according to energy and shipping reporting. The strait is a major global energy choke point. This is such a messy problem for the entire world, if not to say that it could simply become completely insurmountable, Jabarov said according to the reporting. The economic dimension adds to arguments against military escalation from various perspectives. Iranian officials have previously threatened to close the strait in response to various scenarios. Whether Iran could effectively close the strait, and for how long, is debated among naval analysts. The threat serves deterrence purposes regardless of actual capability assessments. He warned step-by-step escalation could raise the risk of a much wider conflict, including worst-case scenarios. The warning invokes severe potential consequences, without claiming certainty about specific outcomes. Jabarov's framing presents escalation dynamics as the key risk rather than predicting specific outcomes. The concern is that initial military action could trigger responses that progressively widen the conflict. I am not at all sure that solely with missile strikes and bombings it is possible to resolve the Iranian problem for the Americans, Jabarov said, according to Russian state media. The statement questions whether limited military action could achieve U.S. objectives. This framing presents a choice between avoiding military action entirely or facing escalation dynamics that Jabarov characterizes as potentially leading to severe outcomes. The binary framing serves Russian messaging interests in opposing U.S. military action. He argued the U.S. might not achieve its goals with airstrikes alone, but that is his assessment, not a confirmed plan. Jabarov expressed doubt about the effectiveness of limited military options. But will the Americans be able to conduct a ground operation in Iran? I don't think that this will be some kind of easy walk, Jabarov said, according to Russian state media. The characterization frames any potential ground operation as facing significant challenges. Iranians are a courageous people with a tremendous history who know how to defend themselves and to protect their homelands, Jabarov said. The characterization reflects his framing of Iranian capacity for resistance. Jabarov's assessment that ground operations would be extremely difficult presents U.S. options as limited. This framing supports the conclusion that military action should be avoided entirely, which aligns with Russian policy positions. Despite his warnings, Jabarov expressed hope that diplomatic contacts could prevent escalation. And I think that just yesterday information emerged that American and Iranian working groups have reportedly started making contact, Jabarov said, according to Russian state media. And I truly hope they won't let the situation escalate into a war. International reporting says a Turkey meeting is being arranged, with Steve Witkoff and Abbas Araqchi named as the lead figures. Jabarov's reference to working groups making contact aligns with this broader reporting on diplomatic channels. The expression of hope for diplomatic resolution positions Russia as favoring peaceful outcomes while warning about consequences of military action. This framing allows Moscow to present itself as a voice for de-escalation. Whether the contacts Jabarov references are the same as those reported by Axios and Reuters, or represent separate channels, is not clear from the available information. Multiple diplomatic tracks may be active simultaneously. A senior Iranian military commander has issued a parallel warning to the United States. Iranian media identified Kioumars Heidari as a deputy commander at the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, according to local reporting. Heidari said Iran will never accept a situation where it is unsafe while others in the region are secure, according to Iranian media reporting. The statement frames regional security as interconnected rather than zero-sum. He warned that if Washington threatens Iran's security, countries supporting the United States, including Israel, would also lose security, according to the reporting. The warning emphasizes Iranian military willingness to respond to perceived threats. The Iranian commander also urged the United States to act wisely, saying it is in America's interest to behave rationally toward Iran, according to the reporting. He warned that any miscalculation would trigger a harsh and regret-inducing response. Heidari's warning that the region cannot remain secure if Iran is threatened reflects Iranian deterrence messaging that frames any attack as triggering regional consequences. This messaging aims to raise perceived costs of military action. The framing of regional security as interdependent rather than achievable through action against Iran represents a consistent element of Iranian strategic communication during periods of tension. Khatam al-Anbiya coordinates Iran's defensive and offensive military planning, according to Iranian media descriptions. Statements from officials at this level are watched as indicators of Iranian military thinking, though the relationship between public statements and actual operational planning is not transparent. He said such forces would be defeated and pushed out of the region, underscoring Iran's readiness to respond with force, according to the reported remarks. The warning emphasizes Iranian military willingness to respond. Iranian outlets reported that President Pezeshkian authorized restarting nuclear talks with the US, but details are still being finalized. Iranian news agency Fars quoted a government source on the decision to open negotiations with Washington on the nuclear file. No timeline for the talks has been announced, according to the reporting. The move comes just hours after Iran's foreign ministry said it was finalizing the framework and methodology for negotiations, with officials indicating preparations are nearing completion. The diplomatic push comes against the backdrop of soaring Iran-US tensions. Iran's domestic situation remains tense, according to international reporting, though details vary by source. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued repeated warnings to Tehran, saying time is running out as Washington ramps up its military presence in the region. Despite the buildup, it remains unclear whether the United States is preparing for direct military action against Iran. Araqchi said Iran's defensive and missile capabilities would not be part of negotiations, according to Reuters. At the same time, he said Iran remains open to serious diplomacy as long as its legal rights and security concerns are respected, according to the reporting. The position frames Iran's nuclear program as potentially subject to negotiation while maintaining that missile capabilities are outside the scope of any talks. This framework differs from reported U.S. preferences for comprehensive negotiations covering multiple issues. The gap between U.S. demands and Iranian red lines presents challenges for any diplomatic resolution. Washington reportedly seeks comprehensive changes while Tehran limits discussion to the nuclear file and sanctions relief, according to various reporting on both sides' positions. Whether the gaps between positions can be bridged depends on flexibility that neither side has yet demonstrated publicly. Araqchi's statement maintains Iran's stated red lines while keeping diplomatic channels open. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has described the ongoing protests as a coup, alleging foreign interference behind the unrest, according to Iranian state media coverage. The framing positions internal dissent as externally driven rather than reflecting domestic grievances. Iran's domestic situation remains tense, according to international reporting, though details vary by source. International human rights organizations have reported on the protests and government response, though casualty figures and other details are disputed between sources. The domestic context affects Iran's international positioning during the current crisis. How internal pressures affect Iranian negotiating positions is difficult to assess from outside, but the dual pressures of external military threat and internal unrest create a complex environment for decision-making. Khamenei's characterization of protests as foreign-backed serves domestic political purposes while potentially affecting calculations about external engagement. The relationship between domestic and international dimensions of the crisis is not straightforward. President Donald Trump has responded to Iranian warnings by suggesting the consequences would become clear if diplomacy fails. Trump said Washington would find out if Iran fails to reach a nuclear deal, according to reported remarks. The statement leaves open what actions might follow failed negotiations. Trump told reporters the U.S. has the biggest, most powerful ships nearby, and said he hopes for a deal, reports say. The pairing of military references with diplomatic hope characterizes the administration's public approach. In a couple of days, hopefully, we'll make a deal, Trump said according to reported comments. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right, referring to Khamenei's warnings about regional war. Reports describe Trump tying military pressure to demands on Iran's nuclear file and broader behavior. Exact terms remain disputed. The framing presents military positioning as leverage for negotiation, rather than preparation for imminent conflict. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that any U.S. military strike would spiral into a regional war, according to Iranian state media coverage. He said if the United States starts a conflict this time, it will not remain limited, according to the reporting. The warning that conflict would not remain limited aligns with Jabarov's concerns about escalation dynamics. Both Russian and Iranian officials frame any U.S. military action as potentially triggering broader regional conflict. State media quoted Khamenei warning retaliation would be severe if Iran is attacked, without detailing specific countries. The regional framing leaves open which countries might be affected and through what mechanisms. The parallel warnings from Russian and Iranian officials, though made independently, reinforce messaging about escalation risks. Whether this messaging affects U.S. calculations is difficult to assess from outside. The warnings come amid significant U.S. military positioning in the region. Reuters reported the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group has arrived in the U.S. Central Command region, and additional air defense systems are being deployed. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. officials say more air defenses are needed before any strike, to protect bases and partners. Those officials describe retaliation risk as a key constraint on timing and scale, according to the reporting. Reports show additional F-15Es have deployed, and F-35As were seen transiting toward Europe. Final destination not confirmed. THAAD and Patriot air defense systems are reportedly being deployed to U.S. bases across the Middle East. The defensive preparations suggest U.S. military planners take Iranian retaliation capabilities seriously, aligning with the warnings from Jabarov and Iranian officials about consequences of any attack. International reporting says a Turkey meeting is being arranged, with Steve Witkoff and Abbas Araqchi named as the lead figures. A top U.S. official told Axios that Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar will be part of the meeting, indicating a broader regional role in facilitating dialogue. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei said Tehran is at the decision-making stage regarding talks, according to his February 2nd press conference. His comments keep the door open and do not confirm specific timing, location, or participants. Baghaei said regional countries have been active in good offices, while separate reports describe Turkey and others as mediators. The intensification of regional diplomatic activity suggests that neighboring countries see both urgency and opportunity in the current moment. Whether diplomatic efforts can succeed before military dynamics create their own momentum remains the central question. Both tracks, military and diplomatic, continue simultaneously. Russia's interest in the U.S.-Iran crisis reflects multiple factors including regional influence, energy markets, and broader competition with Washington. Jabarov's warnings align with Russian policy opposing U.S. military action in the region. Russia has maintained relationships with Iran, including defense cooperation and coordination on various regional issues. The Marine Security Belt exercises with Iran and China represent one element of this relationship. Russian officials have framed their position as supporting stability and opposing unilateral military action. This positioning allows Moscow to present itself as a voice for restraint while pursuing its own regional interests. The economic dimension, including potential oil market disruptions from Strait of Hormuz closure, affects Russian interests in multiple ways. Russian calculations involve multiple factors beyond simple opposition to U.S. action. The convergence of warnings from Russian and Iranian officials emphasizes escalation risks from multiple perspectives. Jabarov warns of broader war. Khamenei warns of regional war. Heidari warns that the region cannot be secure if Iran is threatened. These warnings serve deterrence purposes by raising perceived costs of military action. Whether they accurately describe likely outcomes or represent strategic messaging cannot be determined in advance. The warnings themselves are part of the crisis dynamics. The emphasis on escalation from multiple sources creates pressure for diplomatic resolution. By framing military action as leading to severe outcomes, these officials aim to shift calculations toward negotiation. At the same time, similar warnings have been issued during previous periods of tension without conflict occurring. The relationship between warnings and actual escalation dynamics is not straightforward. The current situation features parallel diplomatic and military tracks proceeding simultaneously. Iranian outlets reported that President Pezeshkian authorized restarting nuclear talks. Military deployments continue. Warnings about consequences intensify. As diplomacy and confrontation unfold in parallel, the region now watches closely to see whether talks can defuse a crisis or if tensions will continue to spiral. As one assessment characterized the situation, the timeline for potential talks remains uncertain. Baghaei indicated Iran is at the decision-making stage. International reporting suggests meetings could occur soon, but no confirmed dates have been announced. Military positioning continues regardless of diplomatic activity. The Wall Street Journal assessment that defensive preparations are ongoing suggests the U.S. is preparing for multiple scenarios even as diplomatic channels remain active. Jabarov's warning that U.S. military action against Iran could spiral into a broader war represents significant framing of current risks from a Russian official during this crisis. The warning aligns with Iranian messaging about regional consequences. Whether such warnings accurately describe likely outcomes or serve primarily as deterrence messaging cannot be determined in advance. The warnings themselves become part of the crisis dynamics, potentially affecting calculations on all sides. Diplomatic channels remain active, with talks reportedly being arranged and Iran indicating it is at the decision-making stage. Whether these efforts can bridge the gaps between U.S. demands and Iranian positions remains uncertain. The ultimate trajectory toward escalation, toward de-escalation, or toward continued standoff depends on decisions yet to be made in Washington, Tehran, Moscow, and regional capitals. The coming days may prove decisive for which track prevails.